I think it's time we had a discussion about the students from the Stoneman shooting, Hogg and Sanchez, the ones who have become big media celebrities in the anti-gun movement that a lot of people are supporting, and very unfortunately, a lot of leftists are actually supporting. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that us, as Marxists, do not support the disarming of the working class. We must maintain all ours, must frustrate any effort to disarm us. Rest of the Marx quote, etc. Now, it's really kind of depressing to see a lot of leftists actively supporting getting rid of guns. Now, I don't think this really is a sensible regulation on guns movement. I don't believe it. This is an abolish gun ownership movement altogether. And I think that's really what it is. Now, to those leftists who are very much into this movement to forward gun control, get rid of guns, essentially what it's really about, let me ask you something. Do you not see that the ruling class is on board with this? The bourgeoisie and its representatives in the media are pushing this wholeheartedly with all of their effort. They are definitely in support of getting rid of firearms. Now, if you find yourself on the same side as the bourgeoisie on an issue, that should at least make you stop and think about what you're doing. If the bourgeoisie want it, is it really that revolutionary? Can it even be revolutionary? I don't think so. But let's go into the two stars even more. Now, Andrew Hogg, that's the guy as opposed to the girl, who, is, I think there's just a lot of unfair criticisms thrown at them, like, you wouldn't be famous if your classmates hadn't died. Well, they wouldn't have had anything to be outraged about. Let's talk about his father, the FBI agent. Now, why is that relevant? Because he has publicly supported what his father does. When they criminalize communities of color, when they commit the abuses that the FBI does, he says it's okay. He's proud of what his father has done. He's proud of what the FBI has done. And the FBI has been one of the worst things for people's rights, well, at least until the NSA toppled them. So why do we get this image that somehow he cares about people? If he cared about people and the safety of communities, wouldn't he be denouncing the FBI for the crimes that they commit against regular people? But it isn't. It's about getting rid of guns. And if that's the kind of person that supports getting rid of firearms, maybe you might want to take a second look at that. Now let's talk about Emma Sanchez and her Cuban background. Keep in mind that she denounces the Cuban government as evil tyrants who took away her family's land. Her parents were landlords. They basically owned plantation slaves, the peasants who were tied to the land, couldn't leave, etc. They were the abusive, exploitive class that dumped all over people and led to the uprising in Cuba that led to the revolution to begin with. And she defends that. She defends that they didn't do anything wrong against the Cuban people, and it's all the evil Castro's fault for their family not being the Compradors, for not being the Gusanos anymore. Now there are people who hide away in the United States lamenting the loss of their exploitive privilege. And she defends that. Think about that as the kind of person who's trying to take guns away. These are the kinds of people that are supported by the ruling elite, the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, and the media with their own media representatives. Think about that. Now let's look at kind of some of their hypocrisy. Now, aside from the fact... Now, there's this idea that somehow school shootings are just evil white males. because just white people are just inherently evil, according to them. But in fact, mental illness plays a great deal a part of it. Like, it does play a huge role in whether or not somebody is a mass murderer, whether people like to admit it or not. I mean, I'm sorry if you just want to blame white people for things. But let's look at the fact that they did bully Nicholas Cruz. Now, they haven't explicitly said it, but they said they deliberately ostracized him. They didn't want anything to do with him. They looked at him sideways just because they knew what kind of person he was. So basically what they did was they took someone who was basically unstable and made it worse. Now, I'm not saying it's their fault for the shooting, but I'm going to say it's a contributing factor. It's a big part of it. You can't claim alienation drives these certain things and think that, dumping on people the way that they dumped on him wouldn't lead to that. In the end, the shooting is the fault of the shooter. Not the people who bullied them, not the gun, but the shooter themselves. And we're at a point where society doesn't even look at why these things happen. They just want to blame the gun, and that'd be the end of it. Oh, it's just an evil white male thing, and then be done with it. You know what the problem with these two stances means? Like, what it actually leads to? Nothing. It doesn't solve the problem. Simply taking guns away won't suddenly stop America from being an alienated, violent society. Simply blaming white people for everything won't accomplish anything. I mean, yeah, you can jump up and down and scream about white privilege, which certainly does exist. I don't deny it. I don't deny that America's a racist society. I don't deny that most of the world is racist. But this simple-minded, just blaming white people thing won't accomplish anything. I mean, you know what, America? Go ahead. Just do it. Just say evil white people this, evil white people that. No, it's your free choice to do so. Go ahead. I'm not gonna stop you. I'm not gonna do anything to hinder your efforts. But you're gonna find that nothing gets accomplished. You're not gonna stop anything from happening. Because the root problem is in capitalism. The root problem is capitalist social relations. And no amount of banning guns or hating white people is going to change that. Because neither of those things is going to get rid of capitalism. Capitalism is a system which must be overthrown by another, just as capitalism overthrew feudalism, just as feudalism essentially overthrew primitive accumulation, and primitive accumulation overthrew tribal society. And that's just the way it's going to have to be. You're not going to get a solution inside of capitalism because capitalism is the problem. And I'm not saying anything here that any Marxist hasn't already said. I'm not saying anything here that we don't already know. But it's unfortunate that it seemingly has to be something that has to get pointed out. I mean, the point is that liberals don't see this. They're so busy trying to preserve the status quo with some niceties added to it. What's the phrase? The capitalism with the human face that they like to give out. But did you notice they never really solve anything? They never get rid of racism. They never create even a real modicum of equality. Because that's a kind of thing you can't have under capitalism. There's a reason why Mao's revolutionary China is the most feminist time that ever existed, which there was the greatest equality between men and women that had ever existed. Because they got rid of a system of inequality and worked towards the most equal society that we can envision. At least for now. So if you're a leftist, don't celebrate these Stoneman shooting kids, Sanchez and Hogg. Because they're a part of the problem. And I don't just mean in the fact that they bullied the guy who ended up causing the shooting, and they do deserve some culpability for that. They shouldn't be blamed for it, but they should take they are guilty of it to some degree. So to fellow leftists, could you stop supporting these kids? There's a lot of them doing that. because you're not going to solve anything. The only thing you're going to do is disarm the working class. And if you stand by the premise that the first world is revolutionary, and that revolution can happen in the first world, particularly the United States, why would you go around advocating taking guns away from people who would be there to overthrow the capitalist class? You would be blatantly contradicting yourself. So I don't get it. So that if you really want to push the idea that the first world is revolutionary, particularly the United States, could you please, at the very least, stop celebrating these kids as some kind of heroes and acknowledge them for what they are? They're media faces of the bourgeoisie who do want to take your guns away. They're the media darlings that are put up as the smiley, happy, innocent face, like the victimhood, to justify taking away guns from the public. Yet at the same time, leaving the police, who are one of the worst abusers of people in the entire country. I mean, I don't have to go into the history of police abuses. You already know that. Why leave guns in the hands of police when they're even worse? Why leave guns in the hands of the U.S. military, who are probably the worst offenders for killing innocent people in the world? And then you go on Twitter and you see Emma Sanchez, or was it Andrew Hug? I can't remember which one of them it was, celebrating veterans of the Afghan War, of the Iraq War, the imperialist conquest of two countries that together has killed 3 million people. If that's the kind of people who want to take away your guns, maybe you need to take a better look at yourself and question, really, in whose interest is it that your guns get taken away? Now, I as a Canadian am screwed. We already don't have guns as it is. And Prime Minister Trudeau is looking to make even stricter gun regulations when we don't even have a problem to begin with. So to you, my American viewers who are going through with this, particularly the leftists, really reconsider actually celebrating these people, because they're not a good thing for you. What they're doing is extremely damaging to your society, because you can't sit there and claim you support a revolutionary war in the United States when you're championing the very people who are trying to take the means of doing so away from you.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.